Imagine workers at a nuclear facility watching helplessly as their centrifuges spin out of control, sabotaged by an invisible enemy they can't see or stop. In 2010, Stuxnet became the world's first cyber weapon, crippling Iran's nuclear program with surgical precision through just a few lines of code. Intelligence suggests the US and Israel built it, but the digital trail vanishes in shadows. That's cyber warfare. Attacks strike faster than a bullet, yet tracing them becomes a global game of clue without answers. This is the new battlefield where viruses replace missiles, and attribution takes years, if it comes at all. The birth of digital weapons. Stuxnet. The Stuxnet worm marked a turning point in modern warfare. Unlike typical malware that steals data or causes digital disruption, this cyber weapon had one clear purpose: physical destruction. It specifically targeted industrial control systems at Iran's Natanz uranium enrichment facility, proving that code could inflict real-world damage comparable to kinetic weapons. Cyber-physical attacks represent a new frontier in conflict. These operations bridge the digital and physical worlds by targeting systems that control machinery, infrastructure, and industrial processes. Before Stuxnet, most security experts considered air-gapped systems, networks physically isolated from the internet, to be relatively safe from cyber threats. Stuxnet shattered that assumption completely. The malware's method of infiltration revealed a critical vulnerability in supposedly secure systems. It spread initially through infected USB flash drives. We'll examine this delivery method in detail later. Once inside Natanz's isolated network, Stuxnet exploited multiple zero-day vulnerabilities, like secret backdoors left unlocked in Windows systems. The worm used 4 different zero-day exploits, including one that allowed remote code execution simply by viewing a malicious Windows shortcut file. Stuxnet's sophisticated design included multiple components working in sequence. First, it established persistence on infected systems while remaining undetected. Then it specifically hunted for Windows computers running Siemens Step 7 software, the brains controlling the facility's centrifuges. The malware could even update itself locally while still avoiding internet connectivity, like a spy receiving coded messages without breaking cover. Iranian technicians first noticed something was wrong when centrifuges began failing at unprecedented rates. The uranium enrichment cascades, which require precise synchronization of hundreds of spinning machines, kept experiencing unexplained failures. Maintenance logs showed normal operations, but in reality, Stuxnet was secretly manipulating their functions, like a puppeteer making marionettes dance while hiding the strings. The worm executed its attack by taking control of the PLCs and issuing conflicting commands. It varied rotational speeds in patterns that maximized mechanical stress, alternately revving centrifuges beyond safe limits, then slamming on the brakes. This caused bearings to fail and rotors to tear themselves apart while displaying normal readings to operators. Some centrifuges reportedly spun at speeds several times higher than their design limits for sustained periods, the equivalent of redlining a car engine until it explodes. Analysis of Stuxnet's code revealed its highly targeted nature. The malware contained exact specifications of the IR-1 centrifuges used at Natanz, including their ideal operating speeds. It only activated when it identified these exact configurations, remaining dormant on other systems, like a sniper's bullet programmed to only detonate inside one specific target. Forensic investigations later showed Stuxnet had spread far beyond its intended target. By mid-2010, security firms detected infections in over 100,000 systems across 155 countries, enough devices to fill a large sports stadium. Most were collateral damage, though the majority of infections occurred in Iran, suggesting the delivery was highly focused but imperfectly contained. Estimates suggest Stuxnet destroyed around 1,000 centrifuges at Natanz, approximately 1/5 of Iran's installed capacity. This set back the Iranian nuclear program by 1 to 2 years, according to most assessments. The attack demonstrated that carefully engineered malware could achieve strategic objectives traditionally requiring military strikes. The complexity of Stuxnet pointed to significant resources behind its development. Security analysts identified components that would require testing on actual centrifuge systems, something only a handful of nations could accomplish. Later reports suggested the US and Israel jointly developed the weapon under a covert program, though neither country has officially confirmed this. Stuxnet revolutionized cyber warfare through its strategic application. Unlike previous cyber operations focused on espionage, this attack achieved permanent physical destruction while maintaining plausible deniability. It operated for months without detection, leaving no clear fingerprints, a ghost in the machine that vanished after completing its mission. The attack blurred traditional boundaries between digital and kinetic warfare. While no explosions occurred, the effects were just as real as physical sabotage. Stuxnet proved that critical infrastructure everywhere potentially faced similar threats, from power grids to water treatment plants, all vulnerable to invisible attackers. Stuxnet's legacy extends beyond its immediate impact. It established a blueprint for future cyber weapons and revealed fundamental weaknesses in industrial control security. Many systems worldwide still use vulnerable software designed when cyber threats weren't a primary concern. The worm also demonstrated that human behavior, like using USB drives across secure systems, could undermine even robust technical defenses. Several elements made Stuxnet particularly dangerous as a precedent. Its ability to spread beyond its target showed how cyber weapons could cause unintended collateral damage. The multiple zero-day exploits it contained indicated attackers could circumvent even well-patched systems. Most significantly, it proved that infrastructure relying on commercial software could be manipulated through its underlying code. The attack raised legal and ethical questions about cyber operations. Traditional laws of armed conflict don't clearly address situations where one country secretly sabotages another's infrastructure without attribution. Stuxnet operated in a gray zone where conventional rules didn't neatly apply, setting a worrisome precedent. Security researchers took months to fully analyze Stuxnet after its discovery. What they found was malware of unprecedented sophistication, roughly 50 times larger than typical worms. The code contained detailed knowledge of industrial processes and multiple layers of obfuscation, a digital Swiss watch compared to the simple malware pocket watches of its era. The political implications were equally significant. By avoiding a conventional military strike, the operation demonstrated how cyber tools could achieve strategic goals without triggering immediate conflict. However, it also lowered the threshold for infrastructure attacks and demonstrated methods other nations might replicate. Modern industrial systems still face similar vulnerabilities today. Many facilities use aging control systems with inadequate security, sitting ducks for sophisticated attackers. The specific vulnerabilities Stuxnet exploited have been patched, but new flaws continue to emerge in critical infrastructure worldwide. Stuxnet was just the beginning of cyber warfare's evolution. Its success showed how digital weapons could achieve strategic effects formerly only possible through physical force. But where Stuxnet was precise and targeted, the next major cyber weapon would prove far more indiscriminate, ushering in an era where collateral damage could span the globe. The USB that shook the world. The Natanz uranium enrichment facility was designed with security in mind. Its most sensitive systems were air-gapped, completely isolated from the internet, creating a physical barrier against cyber threats. This isolation was supposed to make it impregnable to remote attacks. Yet in 2009, someone found a way through this digital moat using one of the most mundane tools imaginable, a USB flash drive. Like a modern Trojan horse, These ordinary devices became the perfect vehicle for infiltration. At Natanz, technicians routinely used USB drives to transfer data between isolated systems and external computers, a necessary workflow that created an invisible bridge across the air gap. One employee's simple act of plugging in an infected drive, whether intentional or accidental, likely introduced Stuxnet into the facility. The malware's creators understood human behavior would be the easiest path past physical defenses. Stuxnet exploited a critical Windows vulnerability, CVE 2010-2568, that executed malicious code automatically when users viewed USB contents in Windows Explorer. No clicks required. Just inserting the drive triggered infection. Combined with advanced rootkit techniques, this allowed Stuxnet to embed itself deep within system files while spreading silently via USB or network shares. Security researchers later found evidence the worm had been mapping Natanz networks for nearly a year before activating. It specifically targeted industrial control systems running Siemens Step 7 software, the interface used to program centrifuge managing PLCs. The malware waited patiently until confirming it had reached the right systems before deploying its payload. The Siemens software vulnerability proved devastating. Stuxnet could inject malicious code directly into PLCs, altering centrifuge operations while showing normal readings to operators. It precisely targeted frequency converter drives, manipulating speeds to cause physical damage while feeding false data to monitoring systems. One technician reportedly described the centrifuges dancing themselves to death, shaking violently before tearing apart at high speeds. Maintenance teams were baffled as machines failed despite passing all diagnostics. The malware's ability to hide its activity was particularly insidious. When increasing centrifuge speeds beyond safe limits, it displayed normal readings on control panels. During maintenance checks, it would temporarily revert to normal operations to avoid detection. The worm's spread beyond Natanz revealed its uncontrollable nature. Designed for a specific target, Stuxnet nevertheless infected over 100,000 computers globally due to aggressive propagation methods. While most infections occurred in Iran, systems in India, Indonesia and elsewhere were compromised, demonstrating how cyber weapons can't always be contained. Forensic analysis showed Stuxnet used stolen digital certificates from Realtek and J-Micron to appear legitimate, bypassing security checks. This sophistication suggested nation-state resources. The physical effects became undeniable in late 2009 as centrifuges failed at unprecedented rates, though the cyber cause remained hidden until mid-2010. The attack highlighted fundamental weaknesses in industrial systems worldwide. Many critical facilities relied on similar setups, older Windows systems running specialized software with poor security. Air gapping alone couldn't protect against attackers exploiting human behavior and system vulnerabilities. Preparations reportedly included building a replica of Natanz in Tennessee to test centrifuge sabotage methods. This test environment allowed fine-tuning Stuxnet's destructive algorithms, evidence of significant investment. The malware could even update itself across air-gapped networks, with payload modules activating only when specific conditions were met. Security experts were alarmed by Stuxnet's use of 4 zero-day exploits, previously unknown vulnerabilities that give no time for patches. Targeting fundamental Windows components, these were valuable assets most attackers would ration carefully. Stuxnet's legacy proved far-reaching. It demonstrated that infrastructure worldwide shared similar vulnerabilities, from power plants to water systems using comparable equipment. The attack showed adversaries could infiltrate and damage facilities remotely without physical access. The anonymous nature of such attacks creates accountability challenges. While evidence points to US and Israeli involvement, definitive attribution remains elusive. This plausible deniability makes cyber weapons attractive to nation-states but complicates international response. Existing treaties didn't clearly address cyber attacks causing physical damage, leaving Stuxnet in a legal grey zone between sabotage and armed conflict. The operation's success depended on precise knowledge of IR-1 centrifuges, suggesting state-level intelligence gathering. Widely considered a turning point in cyber warfare, Stuxnet proved digital attacks could achieve strategic military objectives traditionally requiring physical force. A small skilled team could damage heavily defended facilities with minimal risk, an asymmetric advantage that sparked global cyber arms development. Industrial systems still struggle with similar vulnerabilities today, as upgrading outdated control systems often requires costly shutdowns. While patched Siemens flaws can't be exploited by Stuxnet anymore, new industrial system vulnerabilities constantly emerge. The psychological impact was profound. Supposedly secure systems could be penetrated and manipulated, forcing governments and corporations to recognize cyber warfare as tangible rather than theoretical. By proving cyber weapons could cause physical destruction, Stuxnet lowered the threshold for future attacks. It also highlighted supply chain risks, spreading partly through infected contractor computers that connected to multiple facilities, a tactic now common in cyber espionage. 10 years later, Stuxnet remains one of history's most studied malware, with its techniques becoming standard among advanced threats. While surgical in targeting, Stuxnet's successor NotPetya would show how cyber weapons could spiral out of control, causing global havoc where Stuxnet caused contained damage. The era of precision cyber warfare had begun, but its consequences would prove unpredictable. NotPetya. Cyber war goes global. On June 27, 2017, the world witnessed the most devastating cyber attack in history unfold in real time. NotPetya began as a targeted strike against Ukraine, but within hours became a global digital tsunami, crippling hospitals, freezing supermarket checkouts, and even disabling radiation monitoring at Chernobyl. This wasn't just malware. It was a weapon that would ultimately cause $10 billion in damages, equivalent to wiping out the entire annual GDP of a small nation. The attack spread like wildfire through a poisoned update for MEDOC, accounting software used by 80% of Ukrainian businesses. Unlike typical ransomware, NotPetya's $300 Bitcoin demand was a decoy. Its real purpose was total destruction. Security experts recognized it as a militarized version of Petya ransomware, supercharged with propagation tools that exploited fundamental weaknesses in global networks. NotPetya moved with terrifying efficiency using three primary methods: the Eternal Blue exploit, the same vulnerability WannaCry had used months earlier, stolen network credentials, and lateral movement across connected systems. Imagine a burglar who picks locks, forges keys, and walks through walls simultaneously. That was NotPetya's approach to infiltration. Companies with Ukrainian operations became unwitting carriers, spreading the malware internationally through corporate networks before they even realized they were infected. Maersk's nightmare began when an employee in Ukraine opened an infected file. Within minutes, the shipping giant's entire global network was compromised, from New Jersey to Mumbai. Port operations ground to a halt as cargo tracking systems failed. At Los Angeles, longshoremen tracked shipments with pen and paper, while 17 container ships floated idle offshore. The company's eventual recovery required reinstalling 4,000 servers and 45,000 PCs, a digital reconstruction costing up to $300 million. Maersk's crisis exemplified the attack's cruel irony. The worst damage occurred far from NotPetya's intended Ukrainian targets. 76 port terminals suspended operations, creating supply chain delays lasting months. Pharmaceutical giant Merck lost $870 million when vaccine production lines stopped. FedEx's European subsidiary TNT Express took $400 million in losses. These companies became collateral damage in a cyber conflict they had no part in, their global networks serving as highways for digital destruction. The attack's financial impacts were staggering, but the legal aftermath proved equally disruptive. when food conglomerate Mondelez filed a $100 million insurance claim for 1,700 infected servers and 24,000 bricked laptops. Zurich Insurance denied coverage, citing an act of war exclusion. This unprecedented denial, based on Western governments attributing NotPetya to Russian military hackers, left businesses uncertain whether standard policies covered state-sponsored cyber attacks. The resulting legal battle dragged on for years, becoming a cautionary tale about the insurance industry's unpreparedness for digital warfare. Evidence pointing to Russia's GRU military intelligence unit was unusually specific. Security firms traced the malware to hacking group Sandworm, GRU Unit 74455, noting the attackers had tested versions against Ukrainian targets since 2016. Digital fingerprints were everywhere. Malware compiled during Moscow work hours, Ukrainian language settings deliberately excluded, and reused infrastructure from prior GRU attacks on Ukraine's power grid. In February 2018, the White House and allies issued a rare joint statement explicitly blaming Russia, with the UK's Cybersecurity Agency declaring its certainty about GRU involvement. NotPetya's design revealed its true nature as a weapon rather than crimeware. It didn't just encrypt files, it destroyed master boot records, making recovery impossible even with ransom payment. The malware operated with military precision, prioritizing speed and destruction over persistence. Its collateral damage exposed fundamental weaknesses in global business technology: outdated Windows systems, flat networks without segmentation, and over-reliance on centralized infrastructure. Nation-state actors had found the corporate world's digital Achilles heel. Critical infrastructure operators woke up to their vulnerability. Industrial control systems in power plants and factories often resembled the IT environments NotPetya ravaged. Energy companies realized similar malware could jump from office networks to operational technology, potentially causing blackouts or physical damage. While some rushed to segment industrial systems, many facilities still lag behind, a dangerous gap given rising cyber tensions. The attack forced industries to confront uncomfortable truths. Insurers began rewriting policies to exclude state-sponsored attacks, while companies demanded clearer coverage terms. Governments debated creating cyber attack pools similar to terrorism insurance funds. Businesses realized operating in conflict zones, even digitally, exposed global operations to risk, prompting some to isolate regional IT infrastructures. NotPetya proved there were no true bystanders in modern cyber conflict, only varying degrees of vulnerability. In Ukraine, the attack coincided with Constitution Day, a likely symbolic choice in Russia's ongoing hybrid war. While Ukrainian banks and tax systems suffered catastrophic damage, the global fallout eclipsed these intended effects. Response efforts revealed stark disparities in preparedness. Companies like Maersk with comprehensive backups restored operations in weeks, albeit at enormous cost, while others took months to recover. The event rewrote business continuity planning to account for deliberate cyber destruction alongside natural disasters. Technical analysis showed NotPetya's potency came from blending tools, Petya's destructive core, NSA-leaked Eternal Blue exploits, and Russian espionage techniques. With an infection rate of 10 new victims per compromised machine, it surpassed even the most virulent previous cyber threats. The human toll extended beyond finances. Maersk employees typed manifests on vintage typewriters, engineers flew with servers strapped into airplane seats, and supply chain disruptions caused global shortages lasting years. 5 years later, NotPetya remains the benchmark for destructive cyber operations, not merely for its technical execution, but for revealing how digital weapons ignore borders with catastrophic consequences. Where Stuxnet demonstrated precision strikes against physical infrastructure, NotPetya showed cyber warfare could create economic chaos on a global scale. Together they represent the spectrum of modern digital conflict, one surgically targeted, the other indiscriminately destructive. But understanding who actually pulls the strings, the attribution problem. Proving who launched a cyber attack is like searching for a needle in a digital haystack. The very nature of digital warfare makes tracking fingerprints incredibly difficult. Take Stuxnet and NotPetya as prime examples. These attacks reshaped our understanding of cyber attribution, showing how adversaries exploit the digital landscape's inherent obscurity to evade responsibility. Cyber attribution begins with technical analysis, but quickly becomes murky. Investigators examine malware code for unique signatures, trace command servers, and analyze timestamps. However, skilled attackers anticipate these methods. They route traffic through hacked servers in neutral countries, use encryption to hide communications, and plant false clues, creating a hall of mirrors where every lead could be authentic or deliberately placed to deceive. Some even mimic rival nations' hacking tools to sow confusion. The investigation into Stuxnet's origins reveals how attribution unfolds. When this malware appeared in 2010, cybersecurity firms noticed unusual characteristics. The code contained Hebrew language variables and exploited 4 zero-day vulnerabilities, an unusually high concentration pointing to nation-state resources. Most tellingly, it specifically targeted Iranian uranium centrifuges, indicating deep knowledge of nuclear facility operations. Forensic analysis showed the worm avoided activation between 2007 to 2009, likely a testing period, and excluded computers from certain IP ranges, possibly allies of its creators. By 2012, investigative reporting revealed Stuxnet originated from a joint US-Israel operation codenamed Olympic Games. The NSA developed the malware, while Israel built a replica of Iran's centrifuge facility for testing. Yet neither government officially acknowledged responsibility, demonstrating how cyber operations maintain plausible deniability despite overwhelming evidence. NotPetya presented different challenges when it emerged in 2017. Unlike Stuxnet's precision, this attack caused global collateral damage that made hiding its origins impossible. Analysts noticed it first struck Ukrainian systems on Constitution Day, a symbolic date in Russia's conflict with Ukraine. The attackers used a compromised update for Ukrainian tax software, showing insider knowledge of local infrastructure. Technical evidence pointed squarely to Russian involvement. NotPetya shared code fingerprints with prior malware used by Sandworm, a group tied to Russian military intelligence. The attackers reused command servers from earlier GRU operations against Ukraine's power grid. Most damningly, the malware avoided systems with Russian or Crimean language settings, clearly attempting to spare domestic targets while attacking Ukraine and its allies. Despite overwhelming evidence, Russia dismissed claims as Russophobic without addressing technical specifics. This highlighted another challenge. Even conclusive evidence meets political resistance when states refuse accountability. Without international investigation frameworks, perpetrators can dismiss findings as politically motivated. The political consequences became clear when Western governments took unusual steps to publicly blame Russia. The White House, UK, and EU issued coordinated statements naming the GRU, a rare collective action in cyber diplomacy. These declarations carried geopolitical weight but couldn't force compliance or reparations, serving mainly as symbolic red lines in cyberspace. Structural factors prevent stronger responses even when attribution succeeds. Cyber operations fall below traditional conflict thresholds, making military retaliation disproportionate. Sanctions require broad cooperation to impact nations like Russia. Legal prosecution remains nearly impossible with state-protected suspects. This creates an accountability gap where attribution generates ire without consequences. Industries learned this harsh lesson. When Mondelez International filed a $100 million insurance claim after NotPetya crippled its systems, Zurich Insurance denied coverage by invoking a hostile or warlike action clause, treating the cyber attack like a physical strike. The unresolved dispute showed how attribution confusion permeates corporate risk management. These difficulties create perverse incentives. Nations observing Stuxnet and NotPetya saw sophisticated operations could achieve strategic goals with minimal blowback. Over 30 nations now field military cyber units, many modeling tools on these attacks, a cycle where successful operations inspire replication rather than deterrence. Technical solutions remain limited but evolving. Some firms track hacker groups by analyzing behavioral patterns, coding styles, working hours, tool preferences. AI helps process attack data to spot similarities. However, State actors continuously develop countermeasures that render these methods incomplete. International law lags behind attribution challenges. Treaties like the Tollin Manual attempt cyber warfare rules but lack enforcement. Proposed cyber courts face resistance from nations benefiting from ambiguity. Without evidence standards or impartial arbiters, attribution remains vulnerable to politicization. Human factors also hinder efforts. Cybersecurity talent shortages leave many unable to conduct thorough investigations. Analyst burnout degrades long-term tracking of adversary groups. Insider threats like Edward Snowden's leaks give attackers insight into detection methods, tilting the advantage toward patient, well-resourced adversaries. Failed attribution consequences extend beyond individual attacks. Russian cyber tactics progressed from espionage to disruption to destruction, a trajectory enabled by limited consequences. Similar patterns appear in Chinese intellectual property theft and North Korean cryptocurrency heists, where attribution difficulties reduce risks. Private sector analysts face dilemmas. Security firms must balance publishing findings against retaliation risks. Some soft-pedal attribution to avoid angering nation-states. Others face criticism for overstating confidence to attract attention, further muddying the investigative landscape. Defensive strategies have adapted to attribution uncertainty. Many organizations now assume breach as default, focusing on limiting damage rather than preventing all intrusions. Zero-trust architecture emerged partly because attribution failures proved perimeter defenses unreliable, acknowledging that stopping nation-state hackers may prove impossible, making resilience paramount. Emerging technologies threaten to worsen challenges. AI-powered malware could dynamically mimic different hacker groups. Quantum computing may break current encryption that occasionally helps trace communications. IoT expansion creates millions of insecure nodes for attackers to exploit, each advancement giving adversaries new hiding tools while complicating investigators' jobs. The core dilemma remains. Cyber weapons offer plausible deniability by design, yet deterrence requires confident attribution. Until better technical means or political frameworks emerge, attacks like Stuxnet and NotPetya will remain attractive options. Their lessons show that in cyberspace, denying responsibility proves as strategically valuable as attacking, forcing defenders to prioritize survival over identification in this new era of conflict. Cyber warfare's legal gray zone. When a cyber attack destroys millions of dollars in infrastructure, is that an act of war? Existing international law provides no clear answer. The Geneva Conventions and UN Charter were written for physical conflicts, leaving cyber operations in a legal gray zone, like an old rusted lock trying to protect modern digital treasures. This ambiguity creates dangerous gaps where nations can launch damaging attacks without triggering traditional consequences of warfare. Picture this. Mondelez International, the snack food giant behind Oreos and Cadbury, suddenly finds 1,700 servers crippled by NotPetya malware. Their factories grind to a halt. When they file a $100 million insurance claim, Zurich Insurance slams the door shut, citing an act of war exclusion. The insurer points to Western governments publicly blaming Russian military hackers. Mondelez fires back. How can a cyber operation against Ukrainian accounting software, which accidentally spread globally, qualify as traditional warfare? This billion-dollar standoff shows how outdated legal frameworks crumble under digital realities. The Tollin Manual represents the most comprehensive attempt to apply international law to cyberspace. Developed by NATO legal experts, it suggests cyber operations causing physical destruction equivalent to armed attacks could justify military retaliation. But critical limitations remain. Shared civilian-military networks blur targeting distinctions, while uncertain attribution complicates proportional response calculations. Real-world cases expose these flaws. Russian hackers knock out Ukraine's power grid in 2015. 230,000 people sit in darkness, but no physical force crossed borders. The US and Israel allegedly deploy Stuxnet against Iran's nuclear program, too destructive for espionage, yet not clearly warfare. The United Nations debates cyber norms for years, but deadlocks persist. Russia and China want sweeping prohibitions. Western nations prefer narrow restrictions preserving deterrence options. The insurance industry becomes an unlikely battleground. After NotPetya's $3 billion payout, insurers scramble to rewrite policies. State-sponsored cyber attacks now require $25 million riders. Private actors filling governance voids left by paralyzed international law. Below the war threshold, legal confusion worsens. DDoS attacks, election interference, and intellectual property theft harm without physical destruction. The 2017 UN report vaguely suggests some cyber operations might violate sovereignty, but offers no practical definitions. Counter-hacking operates in shadows. When US Cyber Command disrupts Russian troll farms during 2018 midterms, or Israel reportedly hacks Hamas operatives, these actions lack clear legal authorization. Without frameworks distinguishing defense from offense, such operations risk dangerous escalation. Industrial control systems present nightmare scenarios. Hackers breach a Florida water treatment plant in 2021 through outdated software. But who's liable? Manufacturers selling insecure equipment? Operators neglecting upgrades? Current regulations don't say. Private sector actions further muddy the waters. Microsoft unilaterally dismantles Russian malware in 2020. Cybersecurity firms routinely cross borders to disrupt criminal infrastructure. These operations serve public good while potentially violating sovereignty laws. Prosecutions highlight enforcement gaps. Dutch courts convict 4 GRU hackers in 2018, but their military handlers remain untouchable without Russian cooperation, a loophole encouraging states to outsource attacks to independent contractors. Cyber proxies like Russia's Cozy Bear exploit deniability. State responsibility requires proving control over proxy actions, an evidentiary hurdle few victims can clear. Collateral damage compounds the problem. When NotPetya spreads globally from Ukrainian targets, traditional war principles about minimizing civilian harm become impossible to apply. Verification challenges doom cyber arms control. Code-based weapons duplicate instantly and hide indefinitely. Proposed malware bans ignore how easily hackers modify digital weapons. Even zero-day exploit limits would be unenforceable. No way to audit secret stockpiles. Emerging technologies will worsen the crisis. AI-powered malware complicates accountability. Quantum computing threatens encryption safeguards. Domestic laws diverge wildly. America's defend forward doctrine clashes with China's data localization walls. The result? Impunity reigns. Russian hackers compromise solar winds and attack Ukrainian satellites. North Korea steals cryptocurrency to fund missiles, all without legal repercussions. Smaller nations propose creative solutions like Estonia's digital embassies, but major powers resist constraints on their cyber operations. Businesses demand clarity after NotPetya's billions in damages. Some industries self-regulate beyond legal minimums, recognizing weak rules ultimately increase their costs. Yet the gray zone persists because cyber powers benefit from ambiguity, conducting covert operations while avoiding accountability. As AI malware and quantum hacking advance, legal systems built for physical warfare struggle to adapt. Without progress, this vacuum will keep enabling attacks that destabilize economies and cripple infrastructure worldwide, a slow-motion crisis unfolding faster than our ability to control it. The AI arms race in cyber warfare. Artificial intelligence is reshaping cyber warfare at an unprecedented scale. Did you know AI-powered attacks can now adapt to defenses in milliseconds, outpacing human response times by a factor of 1,000? This evolution creates weapons that learn and behave like digital viruses, constantly mutating to bypass security systems. The cybersecurity landscape reveals a dangerous paradox. While 75% of professionals report increased attacks, with 85% blaming AI, the same technology defends networks. Machine learning detects anomalies, but attackers now automate trial-and-error hacking that once required human effort. Imagine malware that acts like a swarm, testing phishing emails against some employees while probing network vulnerabilities elsewhere, then concentrating resources where defenses falter. Deepfake technology turns information warfare sinister. In 2023, attackers cloned a European energy CEO's voice to authorize fraudulent transfers. AI now mimics writing styles of trusted figures, crafting spear phishing emails indistinguishable from real correspondence. These tools generate fake videos that could destabilize elections, like the fabricated clip of a Ukrainian president surrendering that briefly crashed their stock market. Nation-states weaponize AI with alarming sophistication. A Chinese state actor recently used large language models to develop hacking tools, automate reconnaissance, and refine social engineering. Their AI generated technical translations and resolved coding errors, scaling operations that previously demanded teams of engineers. Autonomous cyber weapons escalate risks unpredictably. Without human oversight, an AI defense system might misinterpret routine traffic as an attack, triggering disproportionate retaliation. Picture a digital immune system misfiring. Malware that learns like a virus could destabilize power grids faster than humans react. Attribution becomes nearly impossible with AI. Algorithms mimic other hackers' techniques while randomizing patterns to avoid signatures. One attack framework plants false forensic evidence, creating plausible deniability for state sponsors. Defenders analyze behavior patterns, but attackers adapt in real time, a cat-and-mouse game played at machine speed. The economics of cyber conflict tilt dangerously. AI slashes attackers' costs while amplifying damage. A single system targets thousands simultaneously, customizing each strike using scraped intelligence. Ransomware now analyzes corporate financials to set optimal demands. One attack netted $40 million by tailoring ransom amounts to insurance policies. Critical infrastructure faces existential threats. Industrial control systems rely on outdated tech, and AI ruthlessly exploits these weak points. Attackers manipulated a water treatment plant's algorithms to alter chemical levels, a preview of how AI could hijack smart grids to trigger blackouts. Surveillance reaches terrifying precision. Facial recognition scans social media to map organizational hierarchies. One APT group used AI to research technical topics, then timed attacks against engineers during system updates. Defensive AI struggles in this arms race. Tools that spot AI-generated content lag behind creation methods. Predictive analytics help, but attackers constantly evolve, like malware that rehearses against simulated defenses before striking. Ethical voids worsen the danger. Who's responsible when autonomous malware causes collateral damage? Self-replicating AI weapons might outlive their creator's control. Imagine ransomware that evolves beyond its original code. The workforce gap amplifies vulnerabilities. Script kiddies now use AI for advanced attacks, while defenders face shortages in AI-skilled personnel. Training programs can't keep pace. One firm needed 18 months to fill a single AI cyber role. Disinformation scales horrifically. Algorithms mass-produce polarized propaganda. Left-wing and right-wing extremist content generated by the same system. AI-A-B tests conspiracy theories, optimizing engagement like a viral marketing campaign from hell. Supply chain attacks grow surgical. AI identifies high-value software vendors. One attack compromised a tax software provider during filing season, hitting 90% of Fortune 500 firms through a single dependency. Legal frameworks are dangerously outdated. No treaties govern AI malware, and verification is impossible. Nations secretly develop prohibited tools with impunity. IoT devices become AI's playground. Smart cameras and thermostats form botnets that learn detection patterns. Researchers found AI automating attacks on weak IoT authentication, compromising 50,000 devices in under an hour. Quantum computing looms as a force multiplier. Future AI could crack encryption protecting infrastructure, then mine exfiltrated data in minutes. Stopping proliferation seems impossible. AI weapons develop in commercial clouds using open-source tools. A $500 cloud account can fund research invisible to regulators. International cooperation falters. Some states view AI cyber tools as legitimate, blocking arms control. When nations can't agree if a digital WMD exists, how can they ban it? Corporate defenses face obsolescence. Phishing training fails against AI crafting perfect impersonations. One firm's CFO wired $25 million after receiving an AI-generated email mimicking their lawyer's writing quirks. Deterrence collapses without attribution. How do you retaliate against an attack that could be a false flag? This uncertainty emboldens adversaries. One state actor probed nuclear plant defenses 47 times before being detected. Emergency response systems aren't ready. AI malware studies containment protocols, then severs communication channels mid-crisis. During a mock attack, responders lost 72% of their coordination capacity within 15 minutes. The trajectory is clear. AI gives attackers permanent initiative. Each defensive breakthrough spawns offensive countermeasures. Democratic societies must out-innovate authoritarian regimes pouring billions into AI weaponization, because in cyber warfare, the rules rewrite themselves faster than we can respond. Deterrence in the digital age. Deterrence in cyberspace operates like a distorted mirror compared to traditional military strategies. Where nuclear deterrence during the Cold War reflected clear images, massive silos and bombers guaranteeing mutual destruction, cyber deterrence shows fractured, shifting reflections. Attribution becomes slippery, attackers wear digital masks, and responses often miss their mark entirely. This fundamental difference creates critical gaps when applying physical conflict frameworks to the digital domain. The U.S. Cyber Command's Defend Forward strategy attempts to navigate this hall of mirrors through proactive measures. As General Paul Nakasone stated, "We don't want to fight fair in cyberspace, we want to dominate." This philosophy drives operations to disrupt threats at their source, like dismantling command and control servers before attacks launch. But how effective can such strategies be when the playing field constantly shifts beneath our feet? The approach marks a radical departure from reactive postures, yet faces unique cyber challenges that traditional warfare never encountered. Several factors warp cyber deterrence's reflection. Nuclear weapons required massive infrastructure. Cyber tools can be built in a basement using commercial tech. This low barrier empowers smaller nations and even hacker collectives. Remember North Korea's 2014 Sony Pictures attack? The US response, economic sanctions, couldn't undo the damage, while military options loomed too large. This proportionality dilemma repeats whenever attackers hide behind jurisdictional shields. Israel's Unit 8200 demonstrated alternative tactics after Hamas cyber attacks in 2019. Their counter-operation didn't just threaten future retaliation, it immediately destroyed servers and exposed operatives' communications. As former cybersecurity chief Yigal Una noted, "We needed to show this wasn't a game with no consequences." Yet such responses walk a tightrope. One misjudgment about attribution could spark uncontrolled escalation. The 2018 US cyber strikes against Russian troll farms illustrate this delicate balance. Officials describe these as measured punches, strong enough to demonstrate capability, but carefully avoiding red lines that might trigger wider conflict. This precision reflects cyber deterrence's core challenge, signaling strength without slipping into escalation cycles that could spill beyond digital borders. Intelligence agencies now meticulously map these invisible boundaries to prevent accidental provocations. Economic dimensions further complicate the picture. After Russia's NotPetya attack caused $10 billion in damages, Western sanctions against GRU officers seemed almost symbolic. Contrast this with tech companies collectively cutting off Russian hacking groups. Sometimes private pressure achieves what government actions cannot. These blended approaches attempt to apply deterrence pressure from multiple angles, yet the scales rarely balance. Legal frameworks appear especially distorted in this digital mirror. The Tolan Manual suggests cyber attacks causing physical destruction comparable to conventional weapons may justify armed response under Article 51 of the UN Charter. But most operations dwell in gray zones, like Russia's election interference or China's intellectual property theft, where political rather than legal mechanisms must drive deterrence. This ambiguity invites aggression, as attackers anticipate limited consequences for actions falling short of war. Credibility forms the clearest reflection in this funhouse mirror. Cyber Command increasingly publicizes operations, disrupting Russian troll farms, dismantling ISIS networks, to showcase capabilities. The 2020 counter-hack against Russian COVID-19 research targeting marked a rare public disclosure specifically to signal resolve. Yet maintaining credibility remains challenging when most operations stay classified. How can deterrence work when both capabilities and responses remain partially obscured? Deterrence failures often reveal inverted incentives. When Russian hackers targeted Ukraine's power grid in 2015, Western technical assistance without punishment reinforced Moscow's risk calculations. Similarly, China's intellectual property theft continues because economic penalties haven't outweighed the strategic benefits. Effective deterrence must flip this equation, making costs exceed whatever advantages attackers seek. Private sector involvement adds another warped perspective. Microsoft seizing Russian spy domains shows how corporations now engage in counter-hacking. But should tech firms become proxies in state conflicts? Without clear rules, deterrence responsibilities blur between governments and businesses, especially when protecting critical infrastructure relies on public-private partnerships. Speed distorts deterrence beyond recognition. Nuclear scenarios allowed weeks for deliberation. Cyber operations demand responses in minutes. Some nations now develop automated systems that counterattack without human authorization. Imagine the risks when machine-speed decisions encounter false positives. Maintaining human judgment becomes both essential and increasingly difficult as attack velocities accelerate. Psychological factors bend perceptions further. Adversaries discount threats if responses are consistently delayed. Witness Russia's repeated election interference testing boundaries. Effective deterrence requires consistent enforcement establishing predictable patterns, a challenge for democracies where political cycles create policy fluctuations. Authoritarian regimes time operations during leadership transitions or domestic distractions, exploiting these inconsistencies. Cross-domain responses attempt to straighten the mirror. After North Korea's Sony hack, the US pivoted to financial sanctions rather than cyber counterstrikes. Similarly, Russian oligarchs faced asset freezes post-election interference. These blended approaches circumvent cyber deterrence limitations but require flawless attribution and risk economic blowback. Emerging technologies like AI promise clearer reflections but may further distort the image. Automated defenses could theoretically guarantee retaliation, but machine learning might misinterpret activities and escalate disproportionately. Without robust safeguards, precisely what current frameworks lack, we risk building deterrence systems that create their own threats. International cooperation remains the clearest missing piece. While the UN hosts discussions, major powers fundamentally disagree on boundaries. Western nations prioritize civilian infrastructure protection, while adversaries seek blanket prohibitions on offensive capabilities. Without consensus about prohibited activities, deterrence threats lack coherent baselines, empowering aggressors to exploit gray zones. Collateral damage presents perhaps the cruelest distortion. Unlike precise nuclear weapons, cyber tools often spread uncontrollably. NotPetya's $10 billion global damage demonstrates this unpredictability. Responsible nations thus face self-deterrence constraints that reckless actors ignore, an asymmetrical challenge undermining credible threats. Non-state actors operate completely outside the mirror's frame. Groups like Our Evil Ransomware lack return addresses for retaliation. When the US disrupted their operations in 2021, it temporarily slowed but didn't eliminate the threat. Deterring such groups requires pressuring their enabling environments, cryptocurrency exchanges, safe havens, rather than the actors themselves. Private companies often find themselves reflected in this funhouse mirror unexpectedly. When Sony Pictures suffered North Korean attacks, they had no means to deter state-sponsored aggression. This power imbalance forces reliance on government protection that often arrives too late. Cyber insurers increasingly exclude nation-state attacks. Zurich denied Mondelez's $100 million NotPetya claim under Act of War clauses, leaving corporations dangerously exposed. Alternative frameworks like cyber resilience attempt to step outside the distorted reflection entirely. Estonia's 2007 experience shows how robust infrastructure can minimize damage from even massive attacks. While resilience makes targets less appealing, it does nothing to protect weaker victims. The attacks simply reflect elsewhere. The future likely involves integrated human-machine systems attempting to clarify the image. AI could analyze threats at machine speed while humans retain escalation control, but maintaining meaningful oversight becomes harder as attack velocities increase. The Pentagon already experiments with AI identifying threats faster than human analysts, recognizing that milliseconds matter during breaches. Cyber deterrence's greatest distortion may be its fundamental opacity. Unlike nuclear arsenals visible to satellites, cyber capabilities remain hidden until used. This encourages dangerous miscalculations, nations either underestimating threats or overestimating defenses. The resulting security dilemma drives arms racing dynamics as states develop capabilities simply because they can't verify others' restraint. Meanwhile, private companies and civilians find themselves Businesses as battlefields. On June 27, 2017, the world's largest shipping company suddenly went dark. Maersk employees arrived at work to find computer screens locked, phone systems dead, and port operations frozen. The NotPetya cyber attack had penetrated their global network, crippling operations from New Jersey to Mumbai. Within hours, 76 port terminals worldwide ground to a halt. Cranes froze mid-lift, tracking systems blinked offline, and 17 ships bound for Los Angeles anchored offshore with no way to unload. Chaos erupted as employees scrambled. We pulled typewriters from storage and dug through filing cabinets for paper records, recalled a terminal manager in Rotterdam. Engineers flew internationally with replacement servers strapped into airplane seats. The company ultimately reinstalled 45,000 PCs and 4,000 servers, rebuilding its entire digital infrastructure from scratch. The $300 million price tag included weeks of lost business. Maersk chairman Jim Hagemann later admitted, "We never imagined cyber could force us back to pre-digital operations." The attack's path revealed cyber warfare's disregard for corporate boundaries. NotPetya initially targeted Ukrainian organizations through compromised accounting software. Companies like Maersk with Ukrainian operations became bridgeheads for global spread. The malware exploited Eternal Blue vulnerabilities and stolen credentials to move unchecked across borders, showcasing how digital interdependence created systemic fragility. Other multinationals suffered similar devastation. Merck lost $870 million when vaccine production halted. FedEx's TNT Express incurred $400 million in damages from paralyzed logistics. French firm Saint-Gobain reported $384 million in losses. These corporations had no geopolitical involvement, yet bore massive costs from state-level digital warfare. Mondelez International's experience set dangerous precedents. The food giant saw 1,700 servers and 24,000 laptops encrypted, missing 1,600 shipments during critical sales periods. When Zurich Insurance denied their $100 million claim citing an act of war exclusion, it triggered the first major test of cyber attack coverage. The unresolved legal battle continues reshaping insurance markets, now routinely excluding state-sponsored attacks or pricing coverage at $25 million per $100 million protected. Supply chain vulnerabilities became undeniable. Medical transcription firm Nuance warned analysts that NotPetya would crater quarterly earnings as critical systems stayed offline for weeks. The incident proved cyber warfare could devastate specialized providers whose failures ripple across healthcare and other sectors. NotPetya exposed fundamental flaws. Many victims still used outdated systems like Windows XP despite available patches. Flat network architectures let the worms spread unchecked. Decades of digital transformation had created vulnerabilities that nation-states could exploit with ease. The aftermath forced reckoning. Companies now scrutinize operations in conflict zones that might expose global networks. Some implement regional IT isolation. Others invest in real-time threat intelligence. NotPetya proved there are no true bystanders, only varying degrees of exposure. Insurance markets transformed. Pre-2017, many policies didn't explicitly exclude nation-state attacks. Now insurers view them as unquantifiable risks akin to terrorism. Some governments propose cyber attack pools, recognizing private markets can't alone absorb state-level threats. Legal interpretations remain murky. The Mondelez Zurich dispute questions whether corporations must assume defense burdens against military-grade cyber threats. No standards establish where private sector responsibilities end and government protections begin. Attribution problems complicate responses. When nation-states disguise operations through proxies, victims can't reliably identify antagonists. Russian hackers posing as criminals create plausible deniability that impedes claims and sanctions. Workforce gaps exacerbate vulnerabilities. Cybersecurity talent shortages leave companies outmatched against state-sponsored hackers. NotPetya revealed how under-resourced teams became overwhelmed during sustained assaults. Supply chain risks multiply exposure. The attack entered via compromised Ukrainian tax software, a vector few monitored. Modern businesses rely on thousands of digital vendors, each a potential intrusion point. Shareholder expectations shifted. Pre-NotPetya, investors pressured companies to minimize cybersecurity spending. Now boards demand stronger protections, though consensus is lacking on reasonable investments against military-grade threats. The asymmetrical nature disadvantages corporations. A single piece of malware costing fractions of defense budgets inflicted billions in damages. Businesses face reactive positions against adversaries with superior resources. Response capabilities proved inadequate. Many victims lacked comprehensive backups, taking months to recover while competitors capitalized. The attack spurred interest in cyber resilience, maintaining functions during attacks rather than just prevention. Geopolitical tensions increasingly target corporations. States attack private entities to exert economic pressure without direct confrontation. NotPetya showed how businesses become acceptable casualties in digital conflicts. Regulations lag behind threats. Frameworks like HIPAA focus on data protection, not destructive malware. Compliance standards address past attacks, not emerging warfare techniques. Long-term risks grow. As critical infrastructure remains privately operated, from energy grids to hospitals, businesses become attractive targets. States increasingly view supply chain disruptions as force multipliers. NotPetya changed threat assessments forever. Pre-2017 security focused on crime prevention. The attack proved state-sponsored malware could cause existential disruption, raising urgent questions about protecting critical infrastructure against military-grade threats. Protecting critical infrastructure. Critical infrastructure remains alarmingly vulnerable to cyber warfare years after Stuxnet and NotPetya exposed systemic weaknesses. Power grids, water systems, hospitals, and transportation networks form the backbone of modern society, and they're increasingly targeted by state-sponsored hackers. These essential services often rely on outdated industrial control systems originally designed without cybersecurity considerations, creating massive attack surfaces for sophisticated adversaries. The Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack in 2021 demonstrated how easily critical infrastructure can be disrupted. Hackers compromised the billing system of America's largest fuel pipeline, forcing a complete shutdown that lasted 6 days. Gas stations across the southeast United States ran dry, causing panic buying and regional shortages. This incident showed how cyber attacks can cripple essential services through secondary effects on operations, a vulnerability that continues growing as infrastructure becomes more interconnected. Ukraine's 2015 power grid attack offers a sobering preview of future risks. Russian hackers cut electricity to 225,000 customers for up to 6 hours by remotely controlling circuit breakers after gaining access through phishing emails. Like an old bridge with crumbling supports, these systems were never designed to withstand modern threats. The operation marked the first confirmed cyber attack, causing widespread blackouts, but likely not the last. Industrial control systems present unique security challenges. Many facilities still use Windows XP or proprietary systems no longer receiving updates, digital equivalents of aging factories with broken alarms. The US government found over 50 Chinese cyber operations targeting pipelines in just 2 years. These systems often can't be patched because they run continuous processes, leaving them exposed like open windows in a storm. The 2021 Florida water treatment plant attack nearly poisoned thousands when hackers increased chemical levels to dangerous concentrations. This near-miss revealed how basic vulnerabilities, shared passwords and obsolete software could cause mass casualties. Similar risks exist across healthcare infrastructure, where the 2024 Change Healthcare breach disrupted pharmacy operations nationwide, preventing patients from filling prescriptions. Transportation networks face equally serious threats. The Port of San Diego's 2018 breach affected cruise terminals, safety systems, and financial operations after hackers moved from IT networks to industrial controls. Like dominoes falling, such incidents show how attacks can cascade through interconnected systems. Legacy equipment compounds these risks. Many power substations still use unprotected protocols vulnerable to simple radio transmitters. Financial infrastructure shows similar weaknesses. The $81 million Bangladesh bank heist succeeded because the institution used $10 routers without firewalls, security equivalent to a padlock on a vault door. Agricultural systems are now targets too, with a 2021 ransomware attack disrupting meat production nationwide by targeting weigh stations and conveyor systems. Communication networks form another vulnerable layer. The 2016 Dyn attack disrupted major websites by overwhelming servers with traffic from hijacked devices. While causing inconvenience rather than danger, it demonstrated how Internet backbone services could be disrupted, a growing concern as emergency systems increasingly depend on these networks. Nuclear facilities represent the highest stakes targets. Beyond Stuxnet, multiple attempts to breach plant networks have occurred worldwide. A 2017 US incident saw hackers reach business systems, narrowly missing critical controls, a warning sign for all high-risk installations. Supply chain vulnerabilities create indirect attack paths. SolarWind's compromise allowed Russian hackers to penetrate multiple networks through poison software updates, like a Trojan horse in digital form. Workforce shortages exacerbate these issues, with 69% of energy companies struggling to recruit security personnel, leaving systems unmonitored. The private-public ownership model creates coordination challenges. Unlike military systems with centralized security, critical infrastructure belongs to corporations with competing priorities. Only 21% of U.S. electric utilities had fully implemented recommended cybersecurity standards by 2022, a dangerous gap in collective defense. Budget constraints limit security upgrades. Some utilities still use Windows 95 because upgrading would require replacing $10 million in specialized equipment, an impossible choice between security and continuity. Regulatory frameworks lag too, with grid multi-factor authentication only becoming mandatory in 2020, years after other industries adopted it. Geopolitical tensions increase targeting. Russian hackers have systematically probed U.S. power grids since 2016, mapping networks for potential future attacks. Chinese groups similarly target telecommunications and transportation, digital reconnaissance that could precede real conflicts. Attack simulations reveal disturbing possibilities. A 2023 Department of Energy exercise projected cascading blackouts affecting 90 million people for weeks if generators were hit simultaneously. Such scenarios show how digital attacks could cause physical damage requiring months to repair. Resilience measures exist but remain scarce. Black start: microgrids can operate independently if primary systems fail, but exist at only 15% of critical substations due to high costs. International cooperation has improved, but remains inadequate against transnational threats. Artificial intelligence introduces new risks and defenses. Hackers use AI to find vulnerabilities at unprecedented scale, while machine learning helps detect anomalies, though legacy equipment limits adoption. Workforce training programs attempt to address skills gaps, but trained personnel often leave for better-paying tech jobs. Decentralization offers one security approach, limiting damage from single breaches, like internet routing around damage. But implementation costs prevent widespread adoption. The stakes grow with each technological advance. Smart grids improve efficiency but create new attack vectors. Some countries show possible solutions. Israel employs active cyber defense, hacking back against attackers. Ukrainian operators maintain isolated backup systems after repeated Russian attacks. These models demonstrate how to harden essential services. Consumer devices create unexpected risks. Hacked smart thermostats could overload power grids by simultaneously cycling on. Just one example of unpredictable attack surfaces in connected environments. Coordinated response plans remain underdeveloped, with legal concerns sometimes preventing breach disclosures that could warn peers. The costs of inaction mount. Cyber insurance premiums have increased 300% since 2020 as underwriters recognize systemic risks. Rating agencies now consider cybersecurity when assessing utility bonds, directly affecting capital costs. A fundamental shift is needed in infrastructure protection. The 2021 U.S. infrastructure bill included $2 billion for grid cybersecurity, and the EU's NIS2 directive imposes stricter requirements. But these efforts must accelerate to match the evolving threat landscape. Without urgent action, we risk learning the importance of security through catastrophe rather than foresight. The future of cyber conflict. Cyber warfare has evolved from isolated digital skirmishes to a persistent global threat, with past attacks like Stuxnet and NotPetya serving as warning shots for what could become a full-scale cyber Pearl Harbor. The next phase of this conflict will introduce threats that could fundamentally reshape security, privacy, and even the nature of warfare itself. 3 emerging technologies are poised to rewrite the rules of cyber conflict. First, quantum computing acts like a master key capable of unlocking every digital safe simultaneously. Current encryption protecting everything from bank transactions to military communications relies on math problems too complex for conventional computers, but quantum machines using Shor's algorithm could crack these codes in minutes. Imagine waking up to find every state secret from the past 30 years suddenly decrypted, or hackers intercepting real-time financial transfers with no way to stop them. The US government is already stockpiling encrypted data it can't read today, but hopes to decrypt once quantum systems mature. This quantum threat extends beyond stolen data to the very foundations of trust online. The digital signatures verifying software updates, passports, and even military orders depend on the same vulnerable cryptography. A breakthrough. Quantum computer could let attackers impersonate government officials or push malicious firmware to power plants and water systems. While researchers race to develop quantum-resistant encryption, transitioning global systems will take decades, a dangerous window adversaries won't ignore. Second, space infrastructure presents an orbital weak point in global security. Modern life depends on satellites for navigation, banking timestamps, and emergency communications, yet these systems remain surprisingly vulnerable. When hackers knocked out Viasat's satellite internet during Russia's Ukraine invasion, they didn't need futuristic tech, just compromised ground station passwords. More concerning are inspector satellites, like those Russia and China have tested, which could physically approach and tamper with other spacecraft. As private companies launch thousands of new satellites, the attack surface expands beyond what any military can monitor. Third, artificial intelligence is creating automated hackers that learn and adapt in real time. Future AI attacks might coordinate millions of compromised devices as a single swarm, probing defenses and concentrating firepower where resistance is weakest. The same machine learning that helps weather apps predict storms could enable attackers to anticipate security patrols at a power plant. Deepfake technology adds psychological warfare to this mix, During Ukraine's elections, AI-generated audio nearly derailed a campaign with fake concession speeches. More dangerously, forged emergency alerts or military orders could trigger real-world conflicts. These technological threats converge on our increasingly connected world. The 2023 casino hack through an internet-connected fish tank thermometer wasn't just quirky. It revealed how any smart device can become an entry point. Security firms now track over 1.5 billion IoT attacks annually, many targeting medical devices and factory equipment that lack basic password protection. Meanwhile, criminal and hacktivist groups now wield capabilities once reserved for nations. The Conti ransomware group paralyzed Ireland's healthcare system, while environmental extremists have plotted attacks on gas pipeline controls. Defenses struggle to keep pace. Traditional security models assume clear network boundaries, but modern systems blend corporate networks, cloud services, and supplier connections. Zero-trust architectures help, but require overhauls most organizations haven't completed. Compounding this, 3.5 million cybersecurity jobs sit unfilled worldwide, especially in critical areas like power plant security that require both IT and engineering expertise. Attackers exploit these gaps, knowing many targets are understaffed. International tensions raise the stakes further. Major powers now openly treat cyber operations as military tools. China's doctrine calls for integrated network electronic warfare, while Russia uses hacks for strategic deterrence. Future conflicts may begin with silent digital strikes before any shots are fired, with unclear rules for response. When Russia attacked Ukraine's grid in 2015, the UN could only issue statements. There's still no international consensus on what constitutes cyber warfare. Economic systems are increasingly weaponized too. North Korea's hackers reportedly generate half the regime's foreign currency through crypto theft and ransomware. The 2023 attack on China's largest bank disrupted global treasury markets, showing how financial systems are interconnected targets. Supply chain attacks have surged 400% since the SolarWinds breach, with hackers poisoning software updates and hardware components to bypass defenses. Critical infrastructure remains alarmingly exposed. 60% of US utilities still mix corporate and control networks despite years of warnings. Hospitals run life support systems on unsupported Windows XP because manufacturers won't provide updates. Climate change compounds these risks. Hackers already pose as relief agencies after disasters, and future attacks could disable flood warning systems during hurricanes. Looking ahead, cyber conflict will likely replace traditional warfare for many geopolitical disputes. Why risk soldiers when malware can disable a nation's power grid? This calculus lowers conflict thresholds while increasing escalation risks, especially when attribution is difficult. We're entering an era where hospitals might revert to paper records not by choice, but after repeated cyber attacks. Two futures are possible. In one, nations establish cyber arms control agreements and shared defenses. In the other, we face constant digital skirmishes periodically erupting into infrastructure collapses. The path depends on whether countries can cooperate despite rising tensions, and whether societies will prioritize security without sacrificing fundamental freedoms. The solution requires more than technology. Redundant systems, workforce training, and contingency planning matter as much as firewalls. Ukraine's energy grid survived later Russian attacks through decentralization and manual overrides, proven strategies in an unproven time. Ultimately, cybersecurity must become like Cold War military readiness, sustained and vigilant, not reactive. Humanity faces a defining challenge. Can we govern the technologies we've created? Future historians may judge this decade as when we either mastered digital weapons or were overwhelmed by them. The front lines are everywhere now, and the next major attack could begin anywhere, at any moment. Will we be ready when it does? Cyber warfare has evolved from theory to strategic reality, with Stuxnet and NotPetya proving digital weapons can cause physical destruction and global chaos. These attacks rival conventional warfare in impact, yet with far less accountability. The coming decade will test whether nations can establish rules for this new battlefield. AI and quantum computing will accelerate attacks while outdated infrastructure remains vulnerable. Without cooperation, we risk constant cyber conflicts erupting into full-blown crises. The time to act is now. Will we prepare before systems fail? Subscribe to stay ahead of technology's hidden threats, because in